Hello guys, this total collapse of the Russian airports with thousands of sweaty and angry Russians inside them inspired me to talk a little bit more about tourism, both in Russia and of Russians outside the country. Honestly, I do not feel sorry for these people, but actually I believe we save them. When Ukrainian drones keep demilitarizing various targets, legitimate targets inside Russia, they cannot fly, and they cannot fly these outdated, totally cannibalized aircraft that keep crashing. So by not letting them fly, we actually save them. And you know that I love this channel because of the dialogue that we are able to develop here in our community. And before recording this video, I've decided to ask you a question. Have you ever traveled to Russia? Would you like to? And maybe share some of your experiences. And just as I predicted, the majority of people have never been to Russia and do not express this desire. And honestly, this tells a lot about the country itself. And you are right. Because first of all, the state of the Russian transport, beginning from their railway and finishing, of course, with aviation, is not satisfactory. And it is actually very, very risky to board a plane inside the Russian Federation. And also, this country is not very, kind towards people who come from different corners of the world and actually are different from the Russian vision of the world. And if you decide to travel to Russia, maybe wait until the dissolution of the Russian Federation, when more beautiful countries will be born and you will be able to discover them, the nature, the new culture now suppressed by the Kremlin. But this topic, I will actually combine a little bit of history with my personal impressions, and let's start with the period of the USSR. Because you all know the dream of the Kremlin and millions of those who support Putin is to recreate the Soviet Union. So we may not say that this is the past, Russia is different now. No, they actually dream about the restoring of this monstrous construct. Back in the USSR, it was almost impossible to travel outside the country. Well, because the Kremlin was afraid. You may see how people live in other countries, compare that to the superb communist achievements and realize that actually all of that is an epic fail. Only travels to socialist countries, countries of the Eastern Bloc were allowed, and once again the routes were very much controlled. And I am like 100% sure that people were accompanied by KGB officers who pretended to be ordinary travelers or maybe guides. A similar situation took place when, for example, you wanted to travel to the USSR. And actually some people tell me you had been able to visit St. Petersburg or Moscow, and here is another important fact that should not remain unnoticed. All these trips to Russia were typically to big cities like St. Petersburg or Moscow that always had enough money from the federal or state budget, and all the rich people lived there, and they typically cleaned the streets, controlled the way the city looks, and that is the reason why people were allowed to travel there in Soviet times. Once again, I cannot imagine you traveling inside the Soviet Union by your own, or deciding what you want to visit, choosing somewhere far east or anything like that. It was always a strictly planned and controlled itinerary, and your guide most likely was the representative of the KGB, same as the translator, and all the experience of a foreigner inside the USSR was totally controlled and supervised, so that you get only the best impressions and you do not see the backyard, the huge backyard of this country. But even after such travels, there were lots of people who managed to see the reality, who managed to see, I don't know, empty shelves or hungry people, or the quality of transport or something else. But I think it's pretty logical when you are not allowed to freely travel in the country. That tells a lot about the state of that country. Starting from the suppressive culture and finishing, they have nothing to boast with. Remember to subscribe to get more updates and to learn more about this mysterious part of the world that unfortunately suffered too much from the Kremlin. And after the collapse of the USSR, lots of people from Russia, Moldova, Ukraine, Belarus were not able to travel a lot because it was super expensive. But Ukrainians started building what I personally call a Ukrainian dream. It's different from the American one. By the way, let me know, what are your national dreams in the comments below? How would you describe them? For a Ukrainian, that would be to have a flat, to be able to get some, additional courses for your children, maybe sports, maybe art, and to be able to travel approximately twice a year, maybe one time inside the country and the second time somewhere outside. This could be like 1 week, 2 week short vacations, but Ukrainians love learning more about the world. Whenever I travel to some destinations typical for my country's tourist choice, I mean outside like Turkey, it would be very difficult not to cross roads with Russians. It was long ago, before the start of the full-scale invasion, but I didn't like the way they behave. Because they are always very loud, very drunk, they are super excited about this all-inclusive. And what I didn't like at all, they always want to shout, to jump. They never respect this personal space, and they also loved identifying people from the former Soviet Republic, saying, "But you're ours because you're beautiful," and that is very, very disgusting. And I have to tell you the truth. So right now, some Ukrainians keep traveling to resorts in Egypt, in Turkey, in Saudi Arabia, for example, where there are a lot of Russians, and hotels started offering this service like no Russian hotels. And I think it tells a lot also about the way people behave. Russian tourists abroad are very easy to identify. They are often disrespectful towards the rules. They love being loud. And what I also noticed, they typically do not understand why you don't understand Russian. Everybody has to understand Russian. They hate learning new languages. And that was actually the problem inside the USSR too, when all the countries, all the cultures were Russified, just because Russians are not able to learn more languages, so they choose not to. And please share these videos to inform others about the realities of our very, very challenging times. But let's talk about tourism in Russia right now, because it's summer season and many Russians plan to spend time in Sochi, for example. Sochi is sometimes named the southern capital of Russia, the resort capital of Russia. It is a very popular destination that was Georgian like 100 years ago, and it's located on the shores of the Black Sea, and Putin's residence was there. But because of the visits of Ukrainian drones to military targets there, they are not able to fly to Sochi, and thousands of Russians were hiding on parking lots of their hotels. Once again, no one's injured because Ukrainians fight the war according to the rules of the war, even if it's a defensive war after years of Russian war crimes and violence. But what is interesting, Putin escaped from his favorite residence, and he wasn't seen there for years already. And that is the proof. He totally failed the blitzkrieg, and he totally failed this myth that he wanted to develop, like he's defending Russia from Ukraine and NATO. I'm sorry, before the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia was a totally safe land, apart from all the problems they caused by themselves. But I mean, no Ukrainian drones, no Ukrainian missiles, no Ukrainian soldiers. But after he decided that the special military operation will bring more safety and security, he failed dramatically. And now dozens and dozens of Russian regions are a war zone, including their favorite resorts. And what is more interesting, hundreds of airports are not operating properly. And for such a large country, actually the largest country in the world, that definitely does not need any new territories, especially taking into account how bad their own territories are, they cannot travel. And to tell you the truth, to bring war back to the country that dreamt about it, is not always about occupying new territories. Sometimes it's about paralyzing key elements of its life, like aviation, like logistics, like oil refining industry. And I think we will come up with some more ideas. So that's why subscribe and follow to get these updates. And what is more illustrative right now, Russia is developing new tourist routes. And these tourist routes are to destinations, are to North Korea. Just imagine that. They have built a resort in North Korea, the most isolated, the most authoritarian country that totally disrespects life of people, even their own people. So they have developed a resort there. And Russians are traveling and speaking about the beauty of North Korea, because I guess their countries are becoming more and more alike. And I've seen some videos from North Korea, and these are ghost cities, something like Chernobyl in Ukraine. You won't see a lot of people, but you will see huge monuments, and it looks so sad. You know, with all this Ukrainian experience, I have promised myself to never be indifferent to problems that people experience in different corners of the world. And I feel very bad that to some extent the world, all these international organizations have allowed people, dictators like Kim Jong-un or Iran regime, to lead countries like that, to suppress people like that. Because there was always a moment in time when the democratic society, the democratic unions, the international organizations could have interfered and actually save lots of innocent lives. But they choose not to. They close their eyes, they don't want to interfere. I am sorry, it's just like you see a person dying on the street because of high blood pressure and you decide not to interfere because maybe this person wants that. No, it's not the way normal human beings act. And I feel very sorry for the people in North Korea, for the people in Iran. Honestly, sometimes for the people in China, especially those who represent different cultures, whose cultures are now suppressed and erased. And we have to be very careful and smart when choosing our traveling destinations. And you know that I do not advise you to travel to Ukraine because it's dangerous, because there are lots of attacks. Russia has chosen this new strategy, understanding they cannot invade and occupy us, that we will not surrender, the front line is stable. So they start simply terrorizing people, attacking them while we're sleeping and hoping that we will give up. That's not the way Ukrainian heart and brain works, but they keep doing it. Plus, after 3.5 years of war, we have developed some algorithms of how we act, when it's more dangerous, when it's less dangerous. We know, at least we are more prepared. It was not our choice, but that is the reason why I don't advise you to travel here, but do travel after we win. Help us then learn more about us in the process through my videos. For example, I have a Discover Ukraine series that tell a little bit more, and many other videos on YouTube. But do not travel to Russia. That's for sure. And I'm actually happy to see that way more people are prepared to travel to Ukraine, even in times of these huge dangers, than they do to Russia. And those desperate who move to Russia because they believe there are some values there, total BS. And they travel and then they don't know how to get out. This is the country very intolerant to any diversity, to any critical comments, that doesn't care much about your personal comfort, your personal space. And actually, I think that is a problem inherited from this communist, Bolshevik philosophy, when people disrespect you if you want to be happy, if you want to be not hungry, if you want to be comfortable, if you want to achieve the most of what you can. It was the attitude that disrespected people's desire to be the best version of themselves, but just be one of many, be nothing, be a part of a huge mass. And that's what we observe right now in the Russian population, which I keep naming population. They are not yet shaped into a society. After they are defeated, some serious work is done from outside and inside the society, maybe in 50 years they will become a society. So anyway, they keep saying that the West is rotting, and I actually believe Ukraine is the West too. And no, we are not rotting, but we're trying to protect ourselves from that rotting Moscow empire. Once again, let me know in the comments below what are the other topics you would like to hear discussed on the channel. You know, that's a dialogue that we develop, so let me know. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel. That's an honor and gives me an opportunity to film and write more. Subscribe to my social media, the links in the description of this video, and do check our merch shop. It has a lot of good items that work well as reminders and conversation starters about Ukraine, and to some extent can be a substitute of your travel to Ukraine until it is safe. But after we win, trust me, I personally will invite you and maybe even develop some itineraries. Let me know, do you think that's a good idea? And I'm waiting to read your vision of your national dreams in the comments, because that's interesting. What is a Danish dream? What is a French dream? What is an American dream now? Thank you once again for being friends of mine and for being friends of Ukraine. United we stand. Slava Ukraini!